welcome back to Noxcast, an Equinox news recap podcast. I'm your host, Charlotte King. I'm the managing executive editor of the Equinox.
And I'm Nathan Hope. I'm the administrative executive editor of the Equinox. And this week we are joined by our art director, Elijah.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. We're happy to have you.
Great.
To start off, do you want to tell people a little bit about who you are and what you do as art director?
So I'm a sophomore here at Keenan State. I'm undeclared for right now. Being art director, I started off as just a staff artist. I'd contribute 2 to 4 illustrations a week, and now I'm art director. The workload hasn't changed all that much since we've got more artists working for us underneath, but it's more about just emailing people, making sure it gets in the right place, just like managing everything.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And we're always, super happy to see the art that comes through that you're doing for us, and now that some of our other art staff are doing. But it's been a great experience to have you on.
Yeah.
To start off with sort of our discussion of this week's paper, I wanted to also turn it over to you and have you talk a little bit about some of the graphics that you did for this paper, starting with there was a graphic for a student life story about the Wellness Center's new Great Start program.
Right. So I get little sheets every week that give a little context of what the story is, what they'd like, or it differs. I get a lot of creative freedom. The prompt this week was sort of like maybe Hootie, the mascot, is standing like before a sunrise, and my mind immediately went to a Simpsons episode which parodied Gone with the Wind, where a character is standing before a sunrise and says, "After all, tomorrow's another day." And I thought, what if I just did that? Because previously, it was last semester, I did a parody of Citizen Kane with Hootie, and that was a lot of fun. I love doing movie parodies, so I thought I'd do that again. So it's his silhouette with a big, gnarly tree, and he's just staring at a beautiful sunset. Sunrise, yeah.
I love getting to hear some of the inspiration behind these because, from our end, we're putting everything together and we've got okay, this is a visual that goes with the story, but I love hearing because we all loved the Citizen Kane parody, but I didn't pick up on that one.
Right.
And then
I've also gotten a newfound appreciation for Hootie after seeing him in all these different various things and sort of the spins you can put on him. It's really such an all-around guy now. It's just
very adaptable.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun.
So if you just wanted to sort of speak to, how you view your art style, how you would describe it, and also maybe how what you do for the Equinox might be different than some of your other work in the past.
Right. Well, I'm very detail-oriented, and I value speed, especially for this job. When I first joined on and I heard how quick the turnaround was for these things, I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to adapt quickly. And I think that's really been a huge help for my personal development, and just the variety of things I'd have to draw. It's things that I would never even think of. It's abstract concepts that I have to find a way to represent. It's just a great mental exercise, and I'm just happy to contribute.
Yeah. Do you have any message or anything to other artists here on campus as to someone who might be interested in joining on as a staff artist?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great help for me. Being able to contribute, it was so cool seeing my name and my work in the papers, and like I said, it helped me a lot with abstract thinking and just speed and improvement.
Yeah, I definitely think it's always interesting when we have people who are coming in from disciplines outside of the direct journalism sphere, to kind of have to adapt to the values that we have as an organization, like timeliness, so that turnaround, and obviously the relation to the text articles. So that's where that abstraction kind of comes in. But that's also where I think it can be really interesting to see how people's different styles adapt to that in unique ways. But all of your work has been super impressive. Everybody always is kind of, waiting for the next one to come in, and it's always cool to see them in print. But yeah, no, it's super interesting to hear how you, from an artist perspective, kind of view what we do at the paper. And then the other graphic, and this is a big one. This is going to kind of launch us into our broader recap discussion. But on a more serious note, the other graphic was for our editorial regarding the NCAA complying with a ban on specifically trans women competing in sports. Okay. So I'll turn that over to you as well if you want to talk a little bit about the process behind that graphic.
Right. So in the e-board meetings, we do the round robin discussion. Everyone gets to voice their opinion on it, and I just sort of have to listen in. And then at the end, I come up with something like just a base idea of like what the graphic will be. And I think I forgot, and I left because I wanted to go home. But then, the next day on Discord, Nate messaged me, and I was like, "What if I did?" Just like the first thing that came off my head, what if I did like the trolley meme where it's like you have to either choose this or choose that, and it's like funding and respecting trans athletes are like both important things. Like, why do we have to choose? It's like this outrage of being in this situation in the first place was what I got from everyone's reactions. Like, there's not an easy solution. There's going to be loss either way. So it's
Yeah, and that's also another thing about being art director is sort of in conjunction with, what we would have our opinions editor do is like the quick turnaround on editorial is a big thing. And so we kind of entrust you as art director to be able to, hear the editorial discussion and, you also have the ability to participate, but then think of like, how can we tie this into, a piece that really illustrates what we're trying to get across. And I think it seems kind of difficult sometimes from like an artist's point of view because it's like not like vague, but like trying to get across our point of view in these like anamorphous topics. But I think it was really good to sort of demonstrate like this depiction of the trans community basically, or a big bag of money, and sort of the choice there and the trolley, going towards the trans person. So I felt like it was a really good illustration of what we were trying to get across in our discussion.
Yeah, and I mean, with topics like this, obviously it demands a certain level of, thinking through and thinking about any potential, implications or just how this is going to kind of hit people. So I remember, Nate and I were discussing when you had pitched the idea of doing like the trolley problem concept for this graphic, and we had a little bit of discussion about whether, we felt that gave the right sort of message, like if that would clearly communicate kind of that thesis of the editorial. But after a little bit of discussion, we ended up deciding like, yeah, that really kind of encapsulates that difficult decision that a lot of people are having to make with this being such like a hot topic. So yeah, no, it turned out great, and I thought that was brilliant. So yeah, great work on both of those this week. And like I said, with that, I think we can sort of pivot right to the discussion of these stories. So again, kind of a combined big topic with our editorial, but also the top sports story from this week, which was kind of a monster piece that Nate wrote. So Nate, I'll go ahead and just kind of let you explain this one.
Right. So I guess the crux of the piece really is about specifically the NCAA's compliance with Trump's executive order, which looked to bar transgender women from participating in women's athletic competition specifically. It's an executive order, and there's some discussion and legal challenges already about the enforceability of this. But basically, he was using regulations under Title IX, which allow the federal government to strip funding of institutions that don't comply with Title IX regulations. And the president was arguing that, allowing trans women to participate in women's sports is causing unfairness in women's sports. Therefore, he could use Title IX to sort of use that as, punishing for schools that would allow that. But the NCAA is a, governing body of athletics across the United States. There's a lot of schools, including Keene State, which are members of the NCAA. We are a Division III school, so all of our varsity sports, those that are in Division III, we have to basically comply with what the NCAA says. And I got the chance to speak with Marty Testo, who's the director of athletics, and sort of get his point of view on how they're tackling the enforcement of that. There's still some open questions about how this might affect club and intramural sports offerings, which are not governed by the NCAA. That's, something that the school just offers. If that's something that the school would continue allowing participation for trans women in women's sports. And then I also got the chance to speak with Mel Adams, who's an exercise science professor, which was a really insightful discussion from the actual scientific point of view. Got some information from some studies that she had referenced. Also got to speak with Ian Kaplan, coordinator of LGBTQ plus student support on campus, to get the more, advocacy point of view, talk about the political issue at hand. And also, our news editor, Tim Fitzpatrick, graciously sent me over some quotes that he got during his interview or meeting with President Melinda Treadwell, who's also on the NCAA Council. But really all around trying to get every single aspect of this. And it's such a big issue that for a long time I felt like, we might have felt at Keene State like, hey, this might not be a thing that comes specifically to us or something that specifically comes to collegiate sports. Obviously, it's been a political hot topic for quite some time, but seeing that come to fruition sort of in this exclusionary policy be put in place, it leaves a lot of people wondering, is the school going to do anything? Is there any legal ramifications? Is there any way that we can challenge this? Where are we going to go from here? So the piece really was trying to, get all those aspects of information out there and then make sure students are more informed about how this particularly pertains to Keene State. And I also did want to mention I was very glad to get a statement from our Congresswoman, Maggie Goodlander, who opposes Trump's executive order. I was really proud of how it came out.
Yeah, I mean, I want to take a second and really kind of commend Nate, who really leaped into action when this topic, when this broke as a really huge moment in NCAA or just like political history, this compliance with the order. It's a great piece and really hits all possible bases that I could think of. The Goodlander statement was very exciting when that came in, to know that we got input from our Congresswoman. But yeah, I mean, there's so much to consider here. It's such a big, complex topic, but I think when it comes to the editorial discussion, one of the big points was how much of a non-issue this ultimately seems to be, because, we've heard it from the NCAA itself. There are, all in all, fewer than 10 trans athletes currently involved in collegiate sports. And so it's such a small percentage. But, I think definitely the body that we end up really taking issue with here is the NCAA. I think that overall, the Keene State response from the perspective of a D3 school is maybe mixed, maybe a little confused, just in terms of how new this is and how much of a muddled issue it can become. But all in all, I can appreciate the position that the college is in terms of sort of stating, we want to prioritize protecting our student athletes and maintaining a position where they are able to access these, fundamental rights as athletes, but also being in a position of we don't really know what we can do right now. But I thought that President Treadwell made a pretty good stand on it by saying, non-compliance with the NCAA isn't really like the most pressing factor here because we're in a position where, I thought it was interesting too to get the statement that to anyone's knowledge, we do not currently have any transgender athletes at Keene State. And so we're kind of in a gray area, but I thought that overall, while we would urge Keene State to continue to be wary and always be looking at options for how the college can best protect its athletes, we're also just kind of in this area. In that case, let's go ahead and move on to our top news story. This is a follow-up on a piece we had done previously, as well as an NHPR piece, which we also spoke about in the last episode as our region and state top story that week. But as we had mentioned, there's a memo currently circulating among Keene State staff and faculty. It's coming down from the university system level, the University System of New Hampshire. And this memo is basically a guide for faculty and staff on how they should respond in the event of immigration and customs enforcement agents coming to the college and trying to conduct a raid. And that renewed fear, again, just for the added context, comes about in response to another Trump executive order, which basically rolls back a previous ordinance that said that college campuses were off limits as a sensitive area that could not be accessed by ICE. But now we're looking at potentially a world where that is no longer the case. There are certain protected areas anywhere that is basically locked. So like a dorm hall, for example, as a non-public building where people reside, that requires some additional paperwork to access from the customs side of things. But yeah, so this is a follow-up piece from our senior reporter, Ryan Pacheco, just kind of breaking down the memo, explaining what it says, how faculty and staff at the college are being asked to, or across the university system actually, are being asked to respond to this, which is basically to not engage, to refrain from engaging as much as possible. Obviously, there are potential circumstances in which ICE would sort of push ahead and continue to pursue beyond being asked to stay back, in which case, conflict is obviously not the requested solution there. But being asked to kind of protect wherever possible.
Yeah, it's kind of also ties in with the whole thing of like everything's so fluid now coming from the federal government in terms of things are happening so fast. And I think it's our sort of job and duty and responsibility to tell students what's the latest on what the college is putting out, what the university system is putting out, on what we should know. As students, it's kind of a frightening time for quite a lot of people. And so I'm glad to see the continued coverage from our senior reporter, Ryan Pacheco, on this topic. He did a really good job, getting in contact with USNH legal counsel to get some clarity about parts of the memo. And I was just really glad that we can continue on letting people know how these federal issues can affect us.
Elijah, anything you want to add?
I mean, yeah, it's because I'm not really a journalism major. hard for me to speak on some things sometimes because I don't have that sort of discipline, that like impartiality. Like I'm getting mad.
No, you're free to comment here. This is
if you asked me to make a graphic about this, I'd immediately go for like some like Star Wars Empire, like fascist big boob type. Yeah, I definitely like pepper it with my own emotions, I think.
I mean, the impartiality can be tough to maintain, because I mean, emotions are running high, to say the least, and this is a contentious issue. But I certainly think that, from my perspective, this memo it's reassuring to a point, I guess, in the sense that I'm glad that the university system is not waiting to take further action in terms of coaching people on how to engage or rather not engage with ICE in the event that were to become something that they had to respond to. And I thought that in Ryan speaking with USNH legal counsel, there was a good bit in there about how, a lot of the time, if something like this were to happen, it can happen right under your nose. So if you're a faculty member and, suddenly one of your students is not coming to class, or if you're a CA and one of your hall residents has been seen around, it can be confusing, it can be sudden, it can be scary. And I think that providing a resource for those people who are in these positions of leadership and often of protection, giving them a guide that they can use to reference and try to have the right state of mind for if that were to happen, that's a good, at least, starting point, because it's scary. It's really scary to think about the idea of members of the college community being suddenly at risk of being targeted when, for a lot of people, this is supposed to be a safe place. This is supposed to be a place where you can make a home and make a community. And a lot of people have, for a lot of people, this is, at least for now, home. And so, I commend the university system for having a response and for preparing something that can hopefully help people feel a little bit more secure. I also think there's a good bit in there about, I think it came from Associate Provost Sue Castriata, talking about ways that students can go to the Keene State website and opt out of having certain public records be accessible. There's a list of types of information that are public for most students, but there's a way to opt out of that. So that's another example, on our end, especially as media. I think it's useful and essential for us to put that information in front of people who might be able to use it. Hey, if you are feeling scared, if you're worried about what the future might hold, here's at least one thing that you can do right now that the college has made available for you that could potentially help, in the event that something were to happen. It might be, another layer of protection to hopefully keep you safe. All right, moving along, we will talk about our region and state top story, which this week was a story also in response to a Trump executive order. There seems to be a lot of that.
It's going to be a lot of that from now on, I guess.
Yeah. We're looking ahead to probably a good semester full of stories where I start by saying that. But this was
We're really going to have to start doing editorial cartoons. Just draw caricatures of people.
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
We love our political cartoons, and there's plenty of material. But yeah, we've got another NHPR story in Region and State this week. This one was going over something that we've definitely talked about a fair amount in the newsroom, and have worked on some pieces about ourselves regarding potential funding cuts to research that receives funding from the NIH, I should have looked it up, National Institutes of Health. Yeah. And the impact that might have. And particularly, this piece focuses on, there was a public session where Dartmouth College and Dartmouth Health hosted a sort of just talk session where they had some personnel available as a resource to sort of talk about the state of things, the impact that those funding cuts would have on medical research, as well as I think there was a little bit of an opportunity for like a Q&A for people who were curious about some of the specifics. But yeah, it's looking a little grim.
Yeah. I did want to give some credit to our newsletter, Tim Fitzpatrick, who I believe was able to attend that press conference. There are some projects on campus on the academic side of things that I believe are funded through the NIH, and sort of, I don't know, I guess can be frustrating to see the lack of understanding about the importance of research in a variety of areas. And a lot of people, there kind of isn't really an understanding of why this is useful. And of course, the continuing gain of knowledge. It's kind of the core of what academia is. College, higher education in particular, the higher you go, the more, specialized, the more particular things that you want to research and learn about. And these grants and funding streams sort of give valuable resources to people so that they can pursue those things without having to, only the wealthiest among us would be able to sort of go about that otherwise. So I think it's kind of it's in a tricky situation again, and I believe that the cuts to those haven't come down as far as I know, at least on the Keene State side of things. It's yet to be seen if there's any specific projects directly in danger or being cut as we speak. Things change quickly, as you can tell, but yeah, it's really tricky. I don't know.
Elijah, did you want to add anything to this one? Okay. Yeah, I think that from the perspective of like having students and faculty here on campus who are working on research, various projects that might be receiving funding that might soon disappear. I just imagine how frustrating and defeating that can feel to potentially be dedicating months, if not years, to working on something to further education, to further just scientific knowledge. There's a lot of important research that comes out of college campuses. And, I know that's not something that Keene State is necessarily known for in terms of its profile as a college. But as we've spoken about on this podcast before, there's a lot of research that goes on in some of the different, facilities on campus. And that can be important work. So I do think that, looking ahead to the future, I was glad that the folks from Dartmouth were able to set something up to kind of get that info out there and let people know where things stand and sort of the overall weight of this issue. But yeah, looking ahead to the future, it's kind of dark. And the only thing I can really say is I hope that for now we can try and see some pushback and look towards an alternative way of this unfolding. But if things do go the way that they're headed right now. I hope that, some sort of alternative will still be possible in the future. All right, I think that'll do it for Region and State. Moving on to student life this week, we have another piece from Nate, which was covering a meeting of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission on campus, which I believe this is the first time that they've met in quite some time, but this was, again, in response to some of the rhetoric that's been coming out of the Trump administration recently. But again, Nate, I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit about reporting on this.
Yeah, I believe it was their first meeting of the semester, and sort of, after winter break, and now that the Trump administration has come in, there's a lot of questions to be answered, and, even recent headlines like today or yesterday about possible wanting to strip funding from institutions pursuing DEI programs. A lot of questions at this meeting, not a whole lot of ability for people to even really give concrete answers as to where to go, what to do. I think a lot of the commission meeting was focused on, is there any way we can rename a lot of things, like Dottie Morris's title as Vice President of Equity and Inclusion, or something to that nature. She was talking about how a possible way to rename her title to something that wouldn't be seen as something that could potentially endanger her job. And, the commission itself being the DEI commission, that's sort of the buzzword, or I guess buzz acronym of this whole new set of attacks on programs that look to advance inclusivity. A lot of questions about, renaming the commission, and things about they're trying to organize courses to correspond with the gen ed requirements of multicultural perspectives. And in order to do that, they want to set aside, this course could be, applied to that, which there was fear even at the meeting that setting aside these courses, which advance the learning of multicultural perspectives, could make it so that those courses could be under attack. A lot of questions about that. Again, there was, I think, one quote that really spoke to me, kind of also relates to the memo, which was also discussed at this meeting, from Juwan On, the associate professor of film, had talked about how she carries her passport with her now, and how her son also carries his passport with him because, she's of Asian descent, and worries about that sort of racial profiling that could come about if there was to be a raid. And I think just a lot of emotion going on in that meeting. It is sometimes hard as a journalist to attend these things and sort of just accurately document. That's what our job is, to document what's going on. And I think it's a really pivotal moment for the commission, for the college, for the country in general. So I'm glad to at least be able to be some sort of vessel so that people in the future can know what was being done, or things like that, in terms of how we're going about tackling these issues that are affecting so much of education, higher ed specifically.
And I think with that already brings us to our arts and entertainment top story for this week, on thankfully a little bit of a different note. A profile coming from copy editor Justin this week on music department student Tori Young, who was recently awarded the Presser Foundation Scholarship. And so, just kind of a look at her career in the music department and as a musician over the course of her life, and what sort of led to her being the selection to receive this award. And I have to gush a little bit because I really love Justin's feature writing. That's something that, like, he's one of our first years on the e-board, and from the first story he took, I noticed that that's really one of his strengths. So I really liked this piece. And it was really just interesting to hear about a student in the music department. You know, I've got some friends in the music department, so Tori's name is familiar to me. But to hear about just sort of the extent of how much she has involved herself with the department and really taken a lot of different opportunities as they've come to her to kind of be a leader and be a very well-rounded musician. I know that percussion is sort of her specialty, but across a lot of different styles, you know, the different groups and ensembles that are in the music department. So I don't know, it was cool to get some background on a name that I've heard before.
Yeah, I think feature writing is really cool. I don't personally do a lot of it, unfortunately, but I just think being able to show someone who cares so deeply about what they do and getting an award like this shows sort of some of the most prominent students from art spaces that often don't get as recognized as people on maybe like the athletic side of things. For example, you know, this is a big deal for Tori, for the program in general, to be able to, you know, get recognized for something that she cares so deeply about. And I think also getting the perspective of people who know her, have worked with her throughout the years at Keene State, they've kind of spoken to just how valuable she is to the program and to the various facets that she's involved in. So I was really happy to read it. Really good stuff. Always like to highlight our students, and also credit to Nicole, our social media director, for getting a really good feature photo as well to go with this.
Yes, I love that photo too. And, you know, Nate, coming from more of like the news perspective, yeah, you know, features can be a little rarer in your world. But for me, I've mentioned before on the podcast, I think, before I was managing, I was the arts and entertainment editor. So that's another reason why a lot of these names from like music and related spheres can ring a bell. But, you know, we deal with a lot more feature stories when it comes to like arts and entertainment or student life. But so, yeah, definitely the kind of thing that I love to see. I love to see when we're able to find the right news peg to say, okay, it's time for a profile. Like it's time to go just see what this person's up to, where they're at in their career as a student and you know, as a young person in their field, and really kind of dive into like what makes them, you know, again, in this case, what made her the best person for this scholarship. I think that will do it for this week's news recap. Thank you very much for watching or listening to Noxcast. I'll do one more time the customary shout out to the fact that Noxcast is now available on streaming, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and the Podbean app, as well as available in video form as ever on our YouTube channel. So whichever of those is most convenient for you, it is available. As always, I want to thank, first of all, Elijah, the one who designed the graphic for Noxcast. It's the first time we've had one of the people in the credits on as a guest. Exciting. But I also want to thank our very own KSC alum, Zach Keenan, for composing the music for Noxcast, as well as our multimedia director, Jakob Hall, for editing Noxcast. We will be back next week with another news recap. Until then, I've been Charlotte King.
And I've been Nathan Hope, and thank you again to Elijah for joining us.
Thank you for having me.